My wife looked at me with cold eyes and said, "You're an adult, cook for yourself." I stood there, exhausted, hungry, and covered in grease from a 14-hour shift. I didn't argue, I didn't scream. I just realized that she was right. I was an adult, and adults don't pay for people who treat them like an ATM. My name is David. I'm 32, and I work as a field technician for a massive industrial equipment company. If you see a factory running smoothly, it's usually because guys like me spend half our lives crawling inside the machines that keep it going. Most days, I'm out there fixing conveyor systems in sweltering warehouses, repairing hydraulic presses in factories, or troubleshooting electrical panels on construction sites. My shifts run anywhere from 12 to 14 hours, depending on how bad things break down. It's hard work, dirty work, but it pays well, and I take pride in it. I'm married to Linda. She's 29, and she came into my life with 2 kids from her previous marriage, Ryan, who is now 11, and Sophie, who is 8. When we first started dating about 5 years ago, everything felt right. You know that feeling when the puzzle pieces just click. We'd cook together on weekends, laughing over a bottle of cheap wine. She'd try these new recipes she found on Pinterest, some great, some disasters we'd end up ordering pizza over. I'd grill steaks in the backyard while the kids set the table like it was a game. We'd sit down together, talk about our days, laugh at Ryan's terrible knock-knock jokes, and Sophie would show us her drawings from school. It felt like a real family. The kind I always wanted growing up but never quite had. After we got married 3 years ago, Linda decided to quit her office job. She wanted to go freelance as a graphic designer so she could be home more with Ryan and Sophie. I supported that decision completely. I saw how much she cared about being there for them, picking them up from school, helping with homework, making sure they had a parent around instead of a babysitter. I thought it was a noble sacrifice. But somewhere along the way, things shifted in a way I didn't notice at first. It was like a slow leak in a tire. You don't realize you're flat until you're already driving on the rim. I started covering more and more of the bills. It made sense at the time since my income was steady and hers fluctuated with projects. The mortgage, the car payments, groceries, utilities, the kids' school supplies, their sports fees, the Netflix subscription, the Amazon Prime deliveries. Everything gradually landed on my paycheck. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that once her freelance work picked up, we'd balance things out again. Months turned into a year, then 2 years, and nothing changed. I didn't complain because I figured that's what you do when you love someone. You carry the weight when they need you to. You step up. But I started noticing other things too. Small things that added up to a heavy picture. Dinner wasn't ready when I came home anymore. Even on days when I texted her my schedule hours in advance, the house wasn't cared for. It wasn't messy exactly, but it wasn't the way it used to be either. It felt like nobody really cared if I walked into a clean space or chaos. Laundry would pile up on the couch. Dishes would sit in the sink overnight. Linda spent a lot of time on her laptop, which I assumed was work. But sometimes I'd come home early and see her scrolling through social media or chatting with friends while the kids watched TV in separate rooms. I'm not saying she wasn't doing anything. She was definitely busy with the kids and her projects, but it felt like I had become invisible. Unless there was a bill to pay or something that needed fixing, I was just a ghost in my own house. Before we get to the breaking point, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories about relationships, boundaries, and self-respect. We are building a community of people who refuse to settle for less than they deserve. Now, let's go back to that Thursday in late July. I remember it perfectly because it was one of those days that just breaks you down piece by piece. I got called out at 6 o'clock in the morning to a factory 2 hours away where their main conveyor system had completely died overnight. The place was like an oven. No air conditioning in the work area, just industrial fans pushing hot air around, and it was 95 degrees outside. I spent the entire day in that heat, crawling under machinery, troubleshooting electrical panels, replacing burned-out motors. My knuckles were busted, my back was screaming, and by the time I finished, it was almost 8 o'clock at night. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. My hands were covered in grease and small cuts from sharp metal edges. I hadn't eaten anything except a protein bar I found in the glove box of my truck around noon. The drive home felt endless. All I could think about was getting home, taking a shower and having a real meal. Maybe a burger, maybe some pasta, just something hot and comforting. I pulled into the driveway a little after 9 o'clock p.m. I walked through the front door, and the house was quiet except for the TV in the living room. Ryan and Sophie were in their rooms, probably getting ready for bed. Linda was on the couch with her laptop, a glass of wine on the coffee table. I dropped my heavy work bag by the door and went straight to the kitchen, hoping maybe there were leftovers from dinner I could heat up. I opened the fridge. Nothing. I saw some sandwich stuff, a few slices of turkey, a jar of mayo, a few yogurts, half a pizza from 2 days ago that looked questionable, but nothing that resembled a meal someone had saved for me. No plate covered in foil, no Tupperware container with my name on it. I stood there for a second, the cool air from the fridge hitting my face, just staring into the emptiness. I felt that exhaustion settle into my bones, heavy and gray. I walked back to the living room and asked Linda, "Hey, is there anything for dinner?" She didn't even look up from her screen. "We ate at 6 o'clock, she said, like I should have known. "There's stuff in the fridge." I took a deep breath. "I just got home," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "I've been working for 14 hours in brutal heat. I haven't eaten since noon. I was really hoping for something more than sandwich supplies." That's when she finally looked at me. Her expression wasn't sympathetic. It wasn't apologetic. It was annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. "You're an adult," she said coldly. "Cook for yourself. I'm not running a restaurant." Those words hit me like a physical thing, like someone had shoved me backward. I just stood there looking at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to realize how harsh that sounded, waiting for her to soften and say, "I'm sorry, babe, I had a long day too." But she just went back to her laptop like the conversation was over. I didn't say anything else. I didn't explode. I just turned around, went back to the kitchen, and made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like I was 10 years old again. I ate it standing at the counter, alone in the dim light of the kitchen. And with every bite I felt something crack inside me. I kept thinking about my parents. My dad worked construction his whole life. Long hours, hard physical labor, and my mom always had dinner ready for him when he came home. Not because she had to. Not because he demanded it, but because she cared about him. She knew he was out there breaking his back for the family and she wanted him to come home to warmth. It wasn't about gender roles. It was about love. It was about consideration. That's what I thought I had with Linda. That same kind of partnership. But standing there with that sad sandwich, I realized I'd been fooling myself. When was the last time she asked how my day was and actually listened? When was the last time she did something just because she thought it would make me happy? I couldn't remember. The thought that scared me most wasn't the cold dinner or the harsh words. It was the question that came after them. Was I just a paycheck to her? Was I just the guy who kept the lights on and the mortgage paid while she lived the life she wanted? I didn't have an answer that night, but I knew something had fundamentally changed. I finished my sandwich, took a long shower to scrub off the grease and the disappointment, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Linda slept next to me like nothing had happened. That phrase kept echoing in my head. "You're an adult. Cook for yourself." And I realized she was right about one thing. I was an adult. And maybe it was time I started acting like one by taking care of myself, because clearly nobody else in this house was going to do it. I just didn't know yet that taking care of myself was going to look very different from what she expected. The next morning, I woke up with a weird clarity. It was like my brain had spent the whole night processing the data and came to a conclusion while I slept. I wasn't going to argue with Linda. I wasn't going to beg for her attention or care. I was just going to do exactly what she told me to do. If she wanted to treat me like a roommate who paid all the bills, then fine. I'd act like one. That Friday, I left for work before anyone was up. I stopped at the grocery store on my way home and bought food specifically for myself. Things I actually liked. Good steaks, thick ribeyes with marbling that looked like art. Fresh vegetables, asparagus, bell peppers, portobello mushrooms. The expensive coffee beans I always skipped because they seemed wasteful. Some craft beer I'd been wanting to try. When I got home around 7 o'clock that evening, Linda and the kids had already eaten something. I don't even know what. She was back on the couch with her laptop. I didn't ask about dinner. I didn't mention anything. I just went straight to the kitchen and started cooking. I seasoned a steak with sea salt and cracked pepper. I got my cast iron pan smoking hot and seared it exactly how I liked it, medium rare with a perfect, crusty exterior. I roasted the asparagus with garlic and lemon zest. I made a loaded baked potato with real butter and chives. The smell filled the house. The scent of sizzling beef and roasting garlic drifted into the living room. I saw Ryan peek into the kitchen with this curious look on his face. "That smells really good," he said, eyeing the steak. "What are you making?" "Just dinner for myself," I said calmly. "Nothing special." Linda appeared in the doorway a minute later. I could feel her watching me as I plated everything. "You made steak?" she asked. There was something in her voice. Not quite hurt, but definitely surprised, maybe a little jealous. "Yeah," I said casually. "I was hungry after work." She waited. She stood there for a beat like she expected me to offer her some, like she expected me to slice off a piece and say, "Here, try this." But I just took my plate, grabbed a frosty beer from the fridge, and went to eat in the small office room I basically turned into my man cave. I closed the door. I heard her walk back to the living room without saying anything else. Saturday morning, I got up early. I made myself a real breakfast. Scrambled eggs with sharp cheddar cheese, thick-cut bacon, sourdough toast, fresh squeezed orange juice. The kind of breakfast I used to make for everyone on weekends before we fell into this rut. Linda came into the kitchen while I was eating, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. She looked at the pan I'd already washed and put away. "You made breakfast?" she asked. "For myself," I corrected. "Yeah," I said, taking another bite of bacon. "There's eggs and stuff in the fridge if you want to make some." She just stood there for a second. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out what was happening. This wasn't the David she knew. The David she knew would have made a platter for everyone. "You're not making any for us?" she asked, and now there was definitely an edge to her voice. A hint of accusation. I looked at her calmly, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and repeated the exact words she'd said to me 2 nights before. "You're an adult," I said. "Cook for yourself." Her face went through about 3 different expressions. Shock, anger, and then this forced neutrality like she didn't want to give me the satisfaction of a reaction. She grabbed a yogurt from the fridge and left the kitchen without another word. That's when I knew this was going to get interesting. The kids asked me later if I wanted to go with them to the community pool. I told them I had some errands to run. Which was true. I needed to go to the hardware store. But the real reason was I wanted to establish that I wasn't automatically available for family activities anymore. Not when nobody seemed to care if I was included or not. Sunday evening, Linda announced she was taking Ryan and Sophie to a movie. Some animated thing they'd been wanting to see. She didn't ask if I wanted to come. She just told me they were going. "Okay, have fun," I said. As soon as they left, I texted my buddy Ethan. "You free?" "Dinner and the game, always," he replied. "We went to this sports bar we used to go to before I got married. We had wings, drank beer, and talked about football and work. Normal stuff. And I didn't think about the cold house or the lonely dinners once for those 3 hours. When I got back around 9:30, Linda was in the living room waiting for me. Arms crossed, the universal sign for I'm not happy. "You went out?" she asked like I'd committed a crime. "Yeah, you guys went to the movies, so I met up with Ethan." "We didn't invite you to the movies because you never want to see kids' films," she said, her voice rising. "I thought maybe we could all do something together as a family tonight." I just looked at her. "You planned the movie without asking me," I said. "You didn't mention anything about doing something together afterward. How was I supposed to know?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just huffed, turned around, and went to the bedroom. That became the pattern for the next week. Monday, I came home, made dinner for myself, ate alone. Tuesday, Linda tried to make a nice dinner for everyone, including me, like she was trying to prove a point. But the conversation was forced and awkward. Wednesday, I started doing my own laundry separately, just my clothes. I left everyone else's in the hamper. Thursday, Linda asked me to pick up Ryan from soccer practice. I told her I had plans. I'd scheduled a dentist appointment I'd been putting off for months. She had to rearrange her entire afternoon to get him, and she was furious. "You never used to be like this," she said that night, confronting me in the hallway. "Like what?" I asked. "Available." "That's because I used to think I was part of a team," I said. "Now I realize I'm just the money guy who occasionally gets asked to do favors." Friday night was when things really escalated. I'd been tracking our joint bank account more carefully. It was something I hadn't paid much attention to before because I figured we were both adults managing money responsibly. But when I actually looked at the statements from the past 6 months, I saw a pattern that made my stomach turn. Hair salon appointments, $200 a pop. New clothes from boutiques. Expensive skincare products. Subscription boxes for makeup, wine, dog toys. We don't even have a dog. It was for her mom's dog. Frequent takeout orders on days when I wasn't home. All of it on the joint account. The account I was depositing my entire paycheck into. Meanwhile, Linda's freelance income went to her personal account that I had no access to. There were charges for the kids too, which was fine. They needed things. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that was ever spent on me unless I bought it myself. Not a birthday gift, not a surprise dinner, not even a simple thoughtful purchase like my favorite snacks or a book I mentioned wanting to read. I sat there looking at the numbers, doing the math in my head, and realized I'd been funding someone else's comfortable lifestyle while living like I was still a broke college kid, saving every penny. The joint account was basically just my account that other people spent from. Linda had her freelance money tucked away safely, growing, while mine evaporated on everyone's needs but my own. This is what financial infidelity looks like. It's not just hiding debt, it's hiding assets and exploiting a partner's generosity. I opened a separate checking account that Saturday. I went to the bank in person, sat down with a banker and set everything up. Starting the following week, I adjusted my direct deposit. I'd deposit just enough into the joint account to cover my share of the actual household bills, mortgage, utilities, groceries. The rest would go into my own account. When Linda asked why I was at the bank so long, I told her I was looking into some investment options, which wasn't technically a lie. I was investing in my own financial independence. That Sunday, I spent most of the day in the garage organizing my tools and thinking. Ryan came out to help me for a while. He handed me wrenches and asked questions about how different things worked. And it was the best conversation I'd had with anyone in the house for weeks. He didn't want anything from me except my time and attention. And I realized that's all I'd ever wanted from Linda too. Sophie brought me a drawing she'd made of our family. In the picture, I was standing slightly apart from everyone else. Not intentionally, I think. Just the way an 8-year-old naturally drew what she observed. I taped it to my toolbox and felt this heavy sadness settle over me. Even the kids could see I didn't really belong anymore. That night, lying in bed with Linda on the far side of the mattress like we were strangers, I had this thought that wouldn't leave me alone. In this house, in this family, I wasn't a husband or a partner. I wasn't even really a parent figure to Ryan and Sophie, despite 3 years of trying. I was a provider, a financial resource, Someone who kept the machine running but wasn't actually part of the life that machine supported. Every interaction had become transactional. Every request was really a demand. Every day was just me showing up to fund a life I wasn't truly included in. I thought about that phrase Linda had used during our argument. "You never used to be like this." And I realized she was right. I never used to have boundaries. I never used to question where my money went or whether I was valued beyond my paycheck. I never used to expect basic consideration or care. I just gave and gave and gave, hoping eventually someone would notice and appreciate it. But that's not how it works. People don't appreciate what they don't value. And Linda had made it crystal clear that the only thing she valued about me was my ability to keep paying for everything. The man behind the paycheck. The guy who worked 14-hour shifts in 95-degree heat. The husband who just wanted someone to care if he came home exhausted and hungry. That person was invisible to her. And you know what the worst part was? I let it happen. I trained her to treat me this way by accepting less and less until there was almost nothing left. But I was done training her. Done hoping things would magically improve. Done being invisible in my own home. I was a financial sponsor for someone else's life. And that realization, as painful as it was, finally gave me the clarity I needed to figure out what came next. Monday morning, I called a family law attorney during my lunch break. His name was Robert Shun. He came highly recommended from a guy at work who went through a messy divorce last year. Robert agreed to see me that Wednesday. I left work early and drove to his office downtown. He was straightforward. No sugarcoating, just facts. We talked about the marriage, the finances, the kids. When I explained that Ryan and Sophie were from Linda's previous marriage and weren't biologically mine, he nodded like he'd heard this story before. The good news hit me like relief I didn't know I needed. My financial exposure was limited. The house was in my name only. My parents had given the down payment as a wedding gift to me before we married, and I'd been paying the mortgage alone. Linda's freelance income went to her separate account while I deposited everything into our joint account. Robert said this worked in my favor. I could demonstrate inequitable contribution. Given the marriage was under 5 years, there were no biological children together, and the financial imbalance was documented. I was looking at a clean separation. I sat in my truck afterward for 20 minutes just thinking. This was real now. I could end this marriage without being destroyed financially. The question wasn't whether I could leave anymore. It was whether I should. I decided to give it one last honest conversation. That Saturday, I asked Linda to talk without the kids around. She got defensive immediately but agreed. We sent Ryan and Sophie to her mom's for the afternoon and sat at the kitchen table. I laid everything out. The loneliness of working brutal hours and coming home to indifference, being treated like an ATM, carrying all the financial weight while she kept her income separate, becoming invisible unless there was a bill to pay. I wasn't yelling. I was just explaining my reality. Linda listened, but her face hardened. When I finished, she told me I was overly sensitive. She said she had a lot on her plate with the kids and her work. She said I chose my job, nobody forced me, and tried to make the cooking incident sound ridiculous, like I was making a mountain out of a molehill over a sandwich. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I explained I wasn't upset about making dinner. I was upset about what it represented, the lack of care, the lack of partnership. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes. And I knew this conversation was pointless, but I had to ask one question. "What am I to you, Linda?" I asked quietly. "What am I besides the money?" She opened her mouth quickly, then stopped. The pause stretched out. 10 seconds, 20. Finally she spoke. "You're a good provider." The way she said it, like that was supposed to be enough. Like that was the highest compliment she could give. It told me everything I needed to know. Not a husband, not a partner, not a best friend. Just a provider. I pulled out the divorce papers I'd kept in my bag and set them on the table. Her face went white. "I can't be married to someone who only sees me as a bank account," I said. I'm filing for divorce." She started crying then. She said we could fix this. She said she could change. She said she didn't mean it like that. I reminded her I'd given her 3 years of chances. "If I have to force you to love me, then it's not real," I said. "And if I have to beg you to care about me, then I'd rather be alone." She kept crying, but I'd heard enough empty promises. The next few weeks were tense. I moved to the spare bedroom. Linda alternated between playing the perfect wife, cooking elaborate meals I politely declined, and being angry, accusing me of abandoning the family. The kids knew something was wrong. One night, Ryan asked if I was moving out. I sat with him and Sophie and explained that Linda and I had grown-up problems and needed to live separately. Sophie asked if they'd done something wrong, and I assured them this wasn't about them. I told them I still cared about them. Ryan asked if they'd still see me, and I promised absolutely. 2 months later, the divorce was finalized. It was a quick process, nothing to fight over. The house was mine. Linda moved out with the kids to a rental apartment nearby. She tried one last time the day before leaving. She dressed up in that same dress she wore on our first anniversary and talked about making reservations at our favorite restaurant. I looked at her and felt only exhaustion. "What we had ended a long time ago," I said. "I just finally accepted it." She left the next day. The house went quiet. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I got promoted to senior technician, which means normal hours and less time crawling inside machines. I started going to the gym, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected, and even started a woodworking hobby in the garage. Ryan and Sophie come over every other weekend to hang out, and it's genuinely good without the tension of the marriage hanging over us. We order pizza, watch movies, and I help Ryan with his science projects. Last week, Ethan asked if I was ready to date again. I told him maybe. But this time, I'd never forget something important. The moment someone tells you to take care of yourself when you are asking for support, believe them. They've already stopped caring. I spent 3 years hoping Linda would see me, and she never did because she didn't want to. She wanted a provider, nothing more. Next time I'll look for someone who wants to be a partner. Someone who shows up because they want to, not because they need something paid for. And if I never see that reciprocity, I won't waste years hoping it will appear. I'll walk away early while I still have enough of myself left to build something better. That's the lesson I learned the hard way, but at least I learned it. What do you think about this story? Was I right to leave, or should I have tried harder to fix it? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to Story Sparks for more real-life stories about resilience and self-worth. Until next time, remember, you deserve to be more than just a provider. You deserve to be a partner.